This is MTG Burgeoning, and in this video we are going to update and upgrade our Child of Alara EDH deck. Thank you for joining us for another installment of the Up and Up series. Today we are updating and upgrading our Child of Alara deck. In the description of this video, you can find a deck tech for the Child. You can also find the most up-to-date deck list for the Child as well, in addition to the video primer series for this build. Now, we have 11 cards going in, 11 cards coming out, and the theme of this video is obsolete. We are now in an age of Magic where there are cycles of cards that are replacing previous cycles of cards, making them completely obsolete. Before we get to that one cycle of cards that will dominate the entirety of this video, we've got one spell that's going in first, with the same idea of obsolete. The card going in, it is Nasty End. Here we have an instant for 1/1 black mana. As an additional cost to cast this spell, we sacrifice a creature. We draw 2 cards. If the sacrificed creature was legendary, we draw 3 cards instead. Of course, this spell is for Child of Alara, so we will draw that 3rd card because, of course, our commander is legendary. This card is going into the 99 and replacing Altar's Reap, which, as you can see, is now completely obsolete. For the same mana value and the same additional cost by sacrificing a creature, Altar's Reap draws us 2 cards, but Nasty End draws us 3 as long as it's the Child that's getting sacrificed. So Altar's Reap is coming out, and Nasty End is finding its way into the 99. Now, for cycles of cards. Here we're talking about some man lands. These are lands with activated abilities that can turn them into creatures. Child of Alara, the 99 of this build, had a cycle of man lands that is now being replaced by an upgraded version. They served their purpose well, but now it's time to move forward and to get more powerful. So with each land, we're just going to go side by side and talk about how it's going to help the build more than the predecessor. So going in is Restless Anchorage, and it's going to replace Celestial Colonnade. All of these lands will enter the battlefield tapped, and they do tap to add one of 2 different colors of mana. Restless Anchorage has an activation cost of 1 in Azorius colors. That's 1 a blue and 1 a white and a blue, and until end of turn, this becomes a 2/3 white and blue bird with flying. And whenever Restless Anchorage attacks, we create a map token. For Celestial Colonnade, its activation cost is 2 generic mana more than Restless Anchorage. Granted, it produces a 4/4 with flying and vigilance, but we don't get the map token. The map token is inconsequential, particularly in a deck that wants to destroy everything, but it is nice to have a little bit of a benefit whenever we turn Restless Anchorage sideways. And plus, jamming 5 mana in to create a 4/4, while jamming 3 mana in to create a 2/3, well, that does pair about right depending on how much mana is going into either one of these lands. Restless Anchorage in, Celestial Colonnade is out. Next up, we have our Dimir lands of Restless Reef and Creeping Tar Pit. Creeping Tar Pit has a lesser activated ability of 1 in Dimir colors to become a 3/2 unblockable until end of turn, whereas the extra colorless mana for Restless Reef creates a 4/4 shark with Death Touch. However, whenever Restless Reef attacks, target player mills 4 cards. Of course, we don't always want to help out the graveyard player at the EDH table, but again, as a recurring theme throughout the rest of this video, it's nice to have that additional little benefit tied to the attacking land. So Restless Reef is in, and Creeping Tar Pit is out. Next up, we have our Rakdos land, which is Restless Vents, replacing Lava Claw Reaches. The activation cost is exactly the same. Restless Vents is a 2/3 red insect with menace, while Lava Claw Reaches becomes a 2/2 black and red elemental with pay X, and this creature gets plus X plus 0 until end of turn. This one is a little bit tough to reconcile, but whenever Restless Vents attacks, we may discard a card, and if we do, we draw a card. So this rummage ability attached to Restless Vents makes it a little more valuable overall than the power buffing of Lava Claw Reaches, which could hit for a big amount of damage, particularly in a build that wants to destroy everything. All right, next up we're going to have our Gruul lands, and that is going to be Restless Ridgeline replacing Raging Ravine. The activation cost is the same once more. Restless Ridgeline is a 3/4 red and green dinosaur, while Raging Ravine is a 3/3 elemental, where whenever it attacks, we put a +1/+1 counter on it. The little additional bonus for Restless Ridgeline is whenever it attacks, another target attacking creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and we untap that creature. So, for some combat chicanery, one of those other creatures could be a land that we could tap for mana during our post-combat main phase. Or if we just want to get over and done with it, that +2/+0 could go right to Child of Alara, and we can send it in for 8/6 trample damage. All right, the last of our ally-colored lands is up next. That's going to be our Selesnya lands. That is Restless Prairie taking over for Stirring Wildwood. Now here we have Restless Prairie with a slightly higher activation cost of 2 in Selesnya colors, but we're getting a 3/3 llama until end of turn. Stirring Wildwood was 1 in Selesnya colors for a 3/4 with reach, so we're definitely losing out on that bid, except the little additional benefit for Restless Prairie: whenever it attacks, other creatures we control get +1/+1 until end of turn. With the number of lands that could attack, in addition to our commander, that +1/+1 ability spread across all of our attacking creatures is a lot more than losing out to the 3/4 that is Stirring Wildwood. So Restless Prairie in, Stirring Wildwood is out. And now we move into our enemy-colored lands, and we're going to begin with Restless Fortress and Shambling Vent. These are our Orzhov lands. And again, the activation for Restless Vents is 1 generic mana more than Shambling Vent. The Fortress gives us a 1/4 Nightmare that's still a land. Notice it does not have any keyword abilities. Shambling Vent is a 2/3 with lifelink until end of turn. So a 1/4 versus a 2/3 with lifelink, and we're losing a little bit on Restless Fortress, but whenever Restless Fortress attacks, defending player will lose 2 life, and we gain 2 life. Gaining back life and also draining our opponents is going to help us speed up our game plan, particularly when once we turn over and reveal who our commander is, we're most likely going to be target number 1 at the EDH table. Next up, we have our Boros lands, and that's going... we have our Izzet lands. It is Restless Spire and Wandering Fumarole. All right, here we have a much lower activation cost for Restless Spire. It's just a blue and a red, as opposed to the 2 additional generic mana needed to activate Wandering Fumarole. With Restless Spire, we get a 2/1 elemental that has, as long as it's our turn, this creature has first strike. The Wandering Fumarole is a 1/4, which allows us the ability to pay 0 mana to switch this creature's power and toughness until end of turn. So a 1/4 or a 4/1. The additional benefit of Restless Spire is whenever it attacks, we get to scry 1. Scrying 1 may not seem like it's a big deal here, but keeping in mind we're always looking for those sacrifice creature spells so that if needed, we can get Child of Alara into the graveyard and make sure that we destroy all non-land permanents. All right, next up we have our Golgari lands. It is Restless Cottage and Hissing Quagmire. The activation cost is a little bit higher at Restless Cottage at 2 in Golgari colors, where the Hissing Quagmire is just 1 and 1 in Golgari colors. The Restless Cottage turns into a 4/4 horror until end of turn, where the Hissing Quagmire was a 2/2 elemental with Death Touch. We're winning that battle already, and that's not even taken into effect that whenever Restless Cottage attacks, we create a food token and exile up to one target card from a graveyard. Graveyard shenanigans aside, if there's any opponents that are trying to abuse their graveyards, and that never happens in Commander, right? Restless Cottage is a great way to make sure that we can get rid of those cards, making sure that everything stays on the battlefield. All right, next up we have our Boros lands. It's Restless Bivouac and Needle Spires. All right, the activation cost is lesser here for the Restless land. That's going to be a 2/2 Ox, whereas Needle Spires for 2 in Boros colors was a 2/1 Elemental with double strike. And whenever Restless Bivouac attacks, we put a +1/+1 counter on target creature we control, which could be itself, could be one of our other man lands, or could be our commander. All right, our last set of lands here, bringing this video to a close. It is our Simic lands. It is Restless Vinestalk and Lumbering Falls. The activation cost is slightly more here with the Restless Vinestalk at 3 generic mana and Simic colors over the 2 generic mana and Simic colors of Lumbering Falls. The Restless Vinestalk gives us a 5/5 plant creature with trample, where the Lumbering Falls give us a 3/3 elemental with hexproof. And the additional benefit of the Vinestalk is whenever it attacks, up to 1 other target creature has base power and toughness 3/3 until end of turn, which is a great way to make one of our opponent's creatures that much smaller so that our oh-so-childish commander can trample right over it. All right, there you have it, MTG BC. 11 new cards going in and 11 obsolete cards coming out. Let me know your thoughts about these changes in the comments section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.